was a quiet morning in Sangir, Malaysia on April 5th, 2019, a day that would later be etched in darkness. In the suburban neighborhood of Taman Sri Muda, life was simple, predictable. Neighbors greeted each other warmly, children played in the streets, and families lived behind walls that hid their private struggles. At the center of this tragedy was Farah, a 29-year-old Muslim housewife, her husband Alan Hakim, 32, and Alan's father Rahman, a 58-year-old retired civil servant. To outsiders, they were an ordinary family. Farah was known as quiet and respectful, always wearing her hijab properly, often seen walking her children to school. Alan worked long hours as a technician at a local factory, and Rahman, after losing his wife in 2018, had moved in to escape the crushing loneliness of widowhood. At first, his presence brought comfort. Alan believed having his father around would help, especially for their two young children. But within the walls of that small house, something sinister took root, something no one in the neighborhood could have imagined. Unbeknownst to Alan, an illicit relationship had begun between his wife and his own father, a bond forbidden by law, morality, and faith. Farah had been married to Alan for 8 years, devoted to her home and children. But with Alan working long shifts, she felt abandoned, unseen. She never voiced her loneliness aloud, but close friends later recalled moments when she hinted at her husband's emotional distance. Rahman, drowning in his own grief, began to see his daughter-in-law differently. At first it was innocent, long talks in the kitchen, offering to help with household chores, an understanding nod when she sighed in exhaustion. But sorrow breeds weakness, and weakness invites temptation. What began as comfort turned into something unspeakable. Late at night, when Alan was still at work, Farah and Rahman sat together in the dimly lit living room, their voices hushed as they spoke of loss and longing. A glance lingered too long, a touch that should not have happened, and then the line was crossed. For months they carried on in silence, bound together by guilt, desire, and fear. No one suspected a thing, not even Alan. But secrets have weight, and the burden of their deception began to show in small, almost imperceptible ways. By July 2019, 3 months after Rahman had moved in, the house was no longer the same. The atmosphere had shifted. On the surface, life went on as usual. Farah greeted the neighbors with a polite smile. Rahman sipped tea at the local coffee shop, chatting with old friends. But inside, the walls bore witness to something rotten. Farah, trapped in the web she had spun, began to demand more from Rahman. What had started as stolen moments in the dark became something transactional. She wanted money, small amounts at first, little indulgences she claimed she deserved. Rahman complied, but resentment festered. He began to feel used, manipulated. The passion that had once blinded him soured into something bitter. Alan remained oblivious. He even thanked his father for helping around the house, unaware of the betrayal taking place under his own roof. But not everyone was fooled. Farah's closest friend, Maya, sensed something was wrong. She had noticed the stolen glances, the fleeting touches that seemed just a second too long. Once, she caught them exchanging a look that made her stomach turn. But she said nothing. Farah, too, felt the walls closing in. What had once felt like an escape now felt like a prison. The thrill was gone, replaced by dread. Rahman had changed. He was colder, distant. And then, without warning, he refused her. It was the beginning of the end. What happens next would shock the quiet streets of Taman Sri Muda forever. Because love and betrayal have a way of demanding a price. And in this house, that price would be paid in blood. Rahman was becoming possessive, his jealousy turning suffocating. Farah, once blinded by their forbidden affair, now lived in fear. She knew that if Alan ever discovered the truth, the consequences would be catastrophic. Not just for her marriage, but for her very existence. Her children's future hung in the balance. By August 2019, the situation was spiraling out of control. Rahman was no longer satisfied with stolen moments in the shadows. He wanted more. He wanted Farah to leave her husband, to destroy everything she had built and belonged to him completely. But Farah refused. The thought of Alan finding out was terrifying, and Rahman's increasing desperation made him unpredictable. Then, in early September, a single mistake sealed their fate. A message, one that should never have been sent. A single notification that turned their secret into a ticking time bomb. It was the night of September 10th, 2019. Alan had just returned home from a grueling shift at the factory. It was late, 11:45 p.m. The house was quiet, his children fast asleep, and Rahman, he assumed, was already in bed. Farah sat in the dimly lit living room, scrolling through her phone, her fingers tense with anticipation. She was waiting for a message from Rahman. "Assalamu alaikum, sayang. Sorry I'm late," Alan muttered, his voice thick with exhaustion. Farah looked up, forcing a smile. "Wa alaikumu assalam, abang. You must be tired." He nodded, heading into the kitchen to pour himself a glass of water. As he stood by the sink, gulping down the cool liquid, a soft chime echoed from the living room. A message. Farah had forgotten to silence her phone. Alan glanced instinctively at the screen, and in that instant, his world shattered. "I can't sleep thinking about you. Don't forget what we talked about. I want you to be mine." The sender's name made his blood run cold. Rahman, his father. The glass in Alan's hand trembled. For a moment, he clung to denial. Maybe he misread it. Maybe it wasn't what it seemed, but the word burned into his brain, undeniable and cruel. Heart pounding, he walked back into the living room, his eyes locked onto the phone, the glow of the screen illuminating the darkness between them. Farah realized too late. She lunged for the phone, but Alan was faster. "Apa ini?" His voice cracked the silence like a whip. Farah's face turned pale. "Abang, I can explain." "Explain what?" His voice was shaking now, his breath ragged. "Explain why my father is sending you messages like this." The air in the room turned suffocating. Hearing the commotion, Rahman emerged from his bedroom, his face creased with artificial confusion. "Ada Appa?" Alan turned to him slowly, holding up the phone. "You tell me." Rahman's expression barely flickered. He knew. He knew. And yet, he still tried to salvage the lie. "Alan, jangan salah faham." "Jangan bohong padaku!" Alan roared, his voice raw with betrayal. Farah broke down, sobbing, pleading with him to listen. But Alan wasn't listening anymore. His entire world had been reduced to a single searing truth. His wife, his father. Both of them had betrayed him. He stormed out, slamming the door so hard the walls trembled. He drove into the night, rage boiling inside him, an uncontrollable storm of pain and humiliation. And as he gripped the steering wheel with white-knuckled fury, one thought consumed him. This will not go unpunished. September 11, 2019. Alan never came home. Farah called him again and again, but he never picked up. Rahman, despite his outward calm, was restless. The atmosphere in the house had shifted into something suffocating, thick with unspoken dread. Farah feared the worst. Would Alan go to the police? Would he seek revenge? She didn't know. She only knew that whatever came next would be worse than anything she had ever imagined. Then 2 days later, on September 13th, the nightmare arrived at their doorstep. Alan walked into the house, but he wasn't alone. 2 officers from the Shah Alam police station flanked him, their presence slicing through the suffocating tension. Farah's heart dropped. The police had received a formal complaint from Alan himself. The accusation was damning, an illegal, immoral affair between a wife and her father-in-law, an act condemned not just by religion, but by the full force of Malaysian law. As the officers stepped forward, Farah turned to Alan, her face streaked with tears. "Please, Abang, don't do this." But Alan's face was hollow, his voice dead when he spoke. "I trusted you, Farah. I trusted both of you." The police wasted no time. They separated Rahman and Farah for questioning. Rahman denied everything, claiming Alan had misunderstood the message. "It was a joke," he insisted. "A mistake." But Farah cracked under the pressure. Shaking, she confessed. Yes, there had been a relationship. Yes, it had happened multiple times. But she insisted she had been manipulated, emotionally cornered by Rahman's kindness and the loneliness Alan had left behind. The officers seized her phone, combing through the messages, searching for proof. Many messages had been deleted, but some secrets refused to stay buried. And soon, blood would be spilled. Forensic analysis of Farah's phone revealed a devastating truth. Hundreds of explicit messages exchanged between her and Rahman. Romantic confessions, intimate conversations, undeniable proof of their affair. As whispers of the investigation spread among neighbors and family, the family's reputation collapsed overnight. The betrayal was no longer just a private wound. It had become public shame. Farah stopped leaving the house. The weight of judgment pressed in from all sides. Her children, too young to understand, sensed the shift in their mother. They felt the absence of their father. Alan had moved out, staying with a friend, refusing to speak to either Farah or Rahman. But silence did not mean surrender. His heart was burning, consumed by rage and humiliation. The people he trusted most had shattered him beyond repair. The police pressed forward. They called Rahman in for a second round of questioning. This time, there was no room for denial. When confronted with the retrieved messages, he broke. I made a mistake, but it wasn't just me. She wanted it too, he stammered, desperate to shift the blame. But for the authorities, guilt was not a matter of who started it. Both were complicit in something unforgivable. They discussed possible charges, including criminal adultery and violations under Sharia law, offenses carrying severe penalties, prison time, public disgrace, total ruin. But the law moved too slowly for Alan, and his fury only grew. The police saw a tangled family scandal. They had no idea they were sitting on the edge of something far worse, a crime that would soon send shockwaves through the nation. By late September 20, the investigation remained open, but no formal charges had been filed. Farah and Rahman had been questioned multiple times. Their phones were still under forensic review, but they remained in the house, living together, eating together, as if nothing had happened. Alan was suffocating under the weight of it. In his eyes, justice had stalled, while his wife and father carried on without consequence. His mind was poisoned by images of their betrayal, playing over and over in an unrelenting loop. He couldn't escape it, and he didn't want to. Then, on October 2nd, an unexpected call changed everything. His cousin, Fasil, had heard the rumors. He wanted to check on Alan. They met over coffee. At first, it was just sympathy, words of comfort. But then, Fasil leaned in, lowered his voice. "If you want, I know someone. He can teach them both a lesson, but it won't be cheap." Alan hesitated. He was not a violent man, but Fasil saw the hatred in his eyes, and he pushed. "How long do you want to wait? The police haven't done anything. Meanwhile, they're still in your house, laughing at you." That night, Alan didn't sleep. Fasil's words echoed in his skull. Teach them a lesson. The next evening, Alan drove to his old neighborhood. He parked in a quiet street, watching the house from a distance. Inside, he saw them, Farah and Rahman, talking, laughing, as if they hadn't destroyed him. Every movement felt like a knife twisting deeper into his gut. 3 days later, on October 5th, Alan met Fasil's contact, a man known only as D. Rough-looking, silent. His reputation spoke for itself, a man who handled problems quietly, permanently. Alan was tense, but D spoke with unsettling calm, as if this were just another business deal. "If you agree, I know how to handle it. No one will ever know, but you pay half up front." Alan didn't hesitate. He handed over an envelope, R300 half of the agreed price. He had just set something unstoppable in motion. Inside the house, Farah was unraveling. She checked the windows obsessively, paranoid that Alan would return. The fear clawed at her. Rahman, too, was restless. What if the police came for him? What if Alan snapped? They lived in constant dread, but neither of them realized that Alan's revenge was no longer in his hands. It belonged to a man without mercy. Then, on October 7th, Farah found a note on the doorstep. The paper trembled in her hands as she read, "You think you can betray me and live happily? Wait for what's coming." Her breath caught. She knew it was from Alan, but she had no idea just how far he was willing to go. Behind the scenes, Alan and Dee were finalizing the plan, a plan that would send the entire community into shock. And as the days passed, the air inside the house grew thick with tension. Two people trapped in their own lies, hunted by the man they had betrayed. The perfect family was dead. What began as a secret affair had transformed into something far worse, a death sentence. No one in Taman Sri Muda could have predicted the horror that was about to unfold. The night of October 12, 2019 was one the quiet neighborhood would never forget. It was 10:30 p.m. Rahman and Farah sat in the living room. The children were asleep. They tried to act normal, but the fear was suffocating. Farah kept glancing at her phone. Rahman chain-smoked, his fingers shaking as he flicked the ashes into an overflowing tray. Then, without warning, the electricity went out. Darkness swallowed the house. Everything went dark. The power cut out without warning, plunging the house into an eerie silence. "Blackout again?" Rahman muttered, standing up to check the fuse box. But Farah felt something deeper than inconvenience, an unshakable dread clawing at her chest. Something was wrong. Before Rahman could reach the back door, the front door exploded inward with a deafening crash. A masked figure, clad entirely in black, stormed into the room, gripping a long metal rod. It was Den, the man Asen had paid for retribution, and he was ready to deliver it. Farah barely had time to scream before Den yanked her up by the hair, dragging her forward with a brutal force. "You think you can betray people and walk away free?" he snarled. Raymond lunged to help her, but Den was faster. The rod swung through the air with sickening force, connecting with Rahman's skull. A sharp crack echoed through the room. Rahman collapsed, blood spilling onto the floor, his vision darkening as pain consumed him. Please, Jingan," Farah sobbed, trembling. But Den wasn't done. He drove his boot into Rahman's ribs, then turned back to Farah, his voice a low whisper. "Salam, Dari Asen." The rod struck again, slamming into her side. She crumpled to the floor, gasping for air. The children, woken by the sounds of violence, began crying from their rooms, but no one came to help. No one was coming. Den showed no mercy. Blow after blow landed, leaving Rahman and Farah battered, their blood staining the floor. But it wasn't enough. Asen had ordered more than suffering. He had ordered an ending. Den pulled a knife from his pocket, the blade glinting in the dim light. This was it. But just as he raised the knife, bright lights flooded the house. "Police! Jangan bergerak!" Chaos erupted. Officers swarmed in, their guns drawn. Den hesitated for only a second before trying to run, but he was tackled to the ground. It was over. Rahman was barely conscious, his face swollen and unrecognizable. Farah, sobbing, was rushed into an ambulance. And Asen, who had been pacing nervously at a nearby petrol station, awaiting news of the attack, was arrested before he even knew the job had failed. Faced with damning evidence, including recorded phone calls and bank transfers, Asen broke down. "I just wanted them to suffer like I did," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. But the law was merciless. The scandal exploded across Malaysia, leaving the once respected family in ruins. Every detail was dissected in the media: the forbidden affair, the betrayal, the hired hitman. The quiet streets of Taman Sri Muda became the backdrop of a crime that horrified the nation. When the trial began in December 2019, courtrooms were packed. The prosecution laid bare the affair, graphic messages exchanged between Rahman and Farah, their secret meetings, their reckless defiance of both family and faith. Rahman sat in silence as the details were read aloud, his reputation obliterated. Asen wept on the stand. "I lost everything, my wife, my father, my family. They destroyed me." Farah, pale and hollow-eyed, broke down. "I regret everything. I have ruined my husband's life, my children's lives. I deserve this." Rahman, shamefaced, gave his own confession. "Yes, the affair was real. It went on for nearly a year. I have no excuses." On February 25, 2020, the judge delivered his verdict. Asen was sentenced to 18 years in prison for conspiracy to commit murder and attempted murder. Den received 22 years and 10 strokes of the cane, his punishment severe, his reputation as a quiet problem solver reduced to that of a criminal. Farah and Rahman, under Sharia law, were sentenced to 6 years in prison for adultery and incest, along with 6 public canings each. They had not faced death that night, but their lives as they knew them were over. A once perfect family, shattered. A quiet neighborhood, scarred forever. a story of love and betrayal, ending in violence and disgrace. And in the silence of their prison cells, they had nothing left but time. Time to relive every mistake, every wound, every choice that had led them here. The price of betrayal was paid in blood, and no one had won. The court also mandated psychological counseling for the children, now placed under the care of Alan's older sister, as neither parent was deemed fit to raise them. The aftermath was a family obliterated. What was once a bond, forged through marriage and blood, was now entirely shattered. Asen lost his freedom and the respect of his community. Farah, once a wife and mother, was left abandoned, disgraced, and alone. Rahman, who should have been a fatherly figure, was now infamous across Malaysia as the man who betrayed his own son in the most horrific manner possible. Neighbors, family, friends, and religious leaders alike were left stunned, unable to comprehend how such a tragedy could unfold in what appeared to be an ordinary family. The case sparked nationwide discussions on morality, family honor, and mental health. Religious authorities used it as a stark lesson in their sermons, warning of the dangers of hidden sins and the devastating consequences of betrayal. Social media was inundated with heated debates. Many sympathized with Alan's torment, but condemned his violent vengeance. Others expressed their outrage over the betrayal between Rahman and Farah. One user commented, "This is why betrayal doesn't just destroy marriages, it destroys entire lives. Everyone here lost." This case serves as a gut-wrenching reminder of how unchecked a betrayal can lead to devastating consequences. There were no winners, only victims. Asen, Farah, and Rahman all paid a tremendous price for their actions. And the children, the true innocents in this tragedy, were left to carry the heavy burden of their parents' sins. The tale of love turned to betrayal, and betrayal turned to blood, will forever haunt the collective memory of Malaysia, one of the darkest family tragedies in the nation's recent history. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more disturbing true crime stories. Leave your thoughts and theories in the comments below. Let us know what you think. Stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video.